we're not going to make it, dude. I'm 46 years old. I'm never going to make it.
It left a lot to the imagination, but it definitely told you what was there.
Don't do any of that at all.
No.
What are they supposed to do with that information? So listen harder.
Oh, God.
And there's your sound clip.
Hello and welcome to Movie
Hello and welcome to Movie Smash, the podcast that looks at comic book movies outside the MCU that you may or may not remember. If you're the type of person that enjoys talking about hidden gems or just likes to tear old movies apart, this is the place for you. With that, let's get started. I'm one of your hosts, Chris Roberts. I'm the founder of Off Panel Creations. With me today, I have Jeremy Parmentier.
Hi, I'm Jeremy Parmentier of the Retrovaniacs podcast and also The Law.
And Fergel Amayo.
Why do you have to steal my line? I am Fergel Amayo, your founder and owner of Gotham Knight Comics, and I am the law. Actually, I love the law. Let's talk about it.
If you can't tell, our movie today is 1995's Judge Dredd, starring Sylvester Stallone, Armand Assante, Rob Schneider. Our director is Danny Cannon. So how familiar were you guys with the characters before seeing the movie?
I was definitely familiar. So this is one of those interesting stories that how I first got into comic books, how I inherited a collection from one of my first best friend's older brothers. He just had a ton of books in his basement. And some of these books were British, like Groot and other things that were just original Astra kind of characters. And Judge Dredd was among them. And so it was in a British anthology, 2000 AD. So I just loved the character. I loved the ABC. Like that was the highlight of the movie when they brought the ABC, because I was like, this is dope. And so, yeah, that I just remember it and thought it was really cool.
Well, I found out it was a comic book character when you see the intro and it shows comic book pages. That's when I was like, oh, this is clearly a comic. So I didn't know at the time when I first saw it. I did actually watch this more recently. We had on Retrovaniacs a patron requested that we cover the Judge Dredd Super Nintendo game. So I rewatched this movie like 4 years ago, so I understood kind of the references. And then I did look up some of the comics, but I've not actually read a lot of the comics. But yeah, I will tell you that the Super Nintendo game for Judge Dredd has little to nothing to do with this movie.
Myself, I was not aware this was a comic until the intro scene when they're showing so many copies laying out. The art style looks great, and the concept sounds interesting, but I've never read a copy of it. Do you guys remember the first time you saw this thing?
Oh, I saw it in the theaters. It got me thinking, because I watched it a few times in anticipation of our wonderful sessions, which I always love to do. Preparation makes the teamwork go. But it just brought back those memories of when I was a kid, hanging out with my brothers, having an amazing chill type of experience and going to see movies afterwards. And that was one of those times where we went to see this movie.
I didn't see it in the theater. I know I did see it on cable at some point, and I don't remember a ton about it. The first time I saw it, I literally remembered that Rob Schneider was in it, and I didn't like him. And other than that, it was Sylvester Stallone, and he looked cool, and I didn't remember anything about the plot. So clearly, I mean, this would have come out in 1995. I probably was busy with other things while watching the movie, so not too big of a shock.
I remember I did see this movie in the theaters. It was the summer before college. That's all I can remember about it. I don't remember where I saw it. I do distinctly remember seeing it in the theaters. So when you guys first saw this movie, what were your initial thoughts around it? Did you enjoy it? What were your thoughts?
So I'm going to start out by saying I first saw the Rob Schneider reference. I'm like everybody else. He's a comedian guy. So I was like, oh, come on, guys. I thought they were taking it a completely different direction. Then the Gianni Versace costumes were a little bit much. I know I'm in the outlier when I say this because they were accurate. Just the tights were unnecessary. But the movie was awesome. Like, it was actually a really good movie. And I think it was good because it's one of the few movies where it drew a lot more than just the first 4 pages out of a comic book. It pulled a couple comics together to give you a great story.
So when I saw this the first time, I remembered, again, I thought that Sylvester Stallone was, kind of just a standard action hero. I didn't know the character's source material enough, and I was like, yeah, okay, he's like a future cop. This is like Demolition Man or something else. Like, I'll enjoy it. I remembered I hated Rob Schneider. However, when I watched it again a couple years ago for the other podcast, I actually didn't hate him as much. I think he actually kind of adds a little bit. I was surprised to admit that. And again, I actually got to pay attention to the plot that time. So I definitely enjoyed this movie a lot more my second viewing. And then for this viewing, I was ready and prepared for what I was about to see.
Yeah, when I first saw this movie, it felt like Demolition Man all over again. You had Sylvester Stallone, Rob Schneider, dystopian future, the cop is framed, they have to hunt down their recently freed nemesis. And even the computers are voiced by the same voice actress. For me, it was just Demolition Man Part 2.
I kind of dig that.
It's amazing, but it's literally the same movie. You can probably spend like 10 minutes saying all the things the same between those two movies.
One of my formative comic experience. This is actually one of the formative because I inherited 4 long boxes of just random Marvel DC indie comics, all from about the 70s, mid 60s, 70s, 80s. When I was still young enough to really appreciate them. And these books, and especially like the Dredd, the 2000 when he was first in there, the separate Dredd titles, and then some of the spin-offs like I keep mentioning ABC Warriors, which is so dope. And it was, you mentioned Carlos Escudera, John Wagner. These are the guys that created it. Published, it's unique. It's published in 77 and it's still around. It's actually published by Rebellion Developments. The movie is actually based on a book, The Return of Rico. Cursed Earth is based on another movie, which is one of my favorite stories, which is Damnation Alley. And actually, Judge Dredd is the 20th greatest comic character out of 286. So he's got a pretty high number.
So if this is your first time joining us, just a quick heads up, we'll be discussing the plot of this very 90s movie, discussing several elements that someone might consider spoilers. So consider yourself warned. If you have not watched this, I do recommend you go watch it. Come back to us and hear our opinions on this thing. So, Jeremy, why don't you give us a quick rundown of the plot?
So this movie is in 2139. It's like the dystopian future sort of thing, kind of like Blade Runner, but dirtier. Sylvester Stallone is the titular Judge Dredd. He's a member of the futuristic law enforcement group that is basically not just the cops, but also, I'm not just the law, but I'm judge, jury, and executioner. So on site of whatever incident they stop, they can decide what if you're going to go to jail, if you're going to be executed, they do it right on the spot. Basically an all-in-one law enforcement with no checks in place, really, other than themselves. This movie starts, there's, again, it's kind of a dirty Blade Runner sort of thing. So there's gang wars all over the city. Things seem to be getting worse and worse is what the background makes you feel like. And so some judges appear to be very interested in kind of hitting an even more extreme fist kind of law enforcement where they really lock everything down. And some judges are like, no, that's too far. We can't do that. Judge Dredd seems to kind of be in the middle on that. He doesn't really care either way. He does his job. He's no nonsense. If anything, he's very hardcore with what he decides to do. He seems very extreme. But as a result, a lot of the new recruits and everyone find him to kind of be like their idol. So at some point, Dredd gets framed for using his judge powers incorrectly to murder somebody and goes off to prison in like an ICE prison. Meanwhile, an ex-judge who was in prison for inappropriately using his judge abilities, named Rico, is broken out of prison, and he seems to be unofficially helping these judges that are trying to make things worse in the city so that eventually they'll get all the power they want. At some point, Judge Dredd and his prison ships gets attacked by an Outlander gang in the wasteland, which I thought was really cool. And then the rest of the movie is kind of him fighting his way back to the city to see if he can stop Rico and prove his own innocence.
It's not for this council to play God.
Excuse me? We're not together.
As a city, we continue to grow.
73 citizen riots.
Come and get us! Throw out your weapons and prepare to be judged. Guilty as charged. I am not the law. I am the law.
You want chaos?
The sentence shall be life imprisonment.
I'm the chaos.
Court's adjourned.
I am the law. I just had to add that in there.
Yeah, let's get out of your system now. I am the law.
I am the law. That will be repeatedly said at different points. I just feel like what Jeremy added was an amazing intro and outro. I felt like I was wrapped by your story and I just had to stop and listen. And I add that at the end.
Besides Judge Dredd, who is one of your favorite characters?
ABC Warriors. I don't think enough can be said about, well, first off, I mean, Fergie, it just bothered me. Maybe it's because I'm named Fergel, but it bothered me. So I'm going to leave that one alone. Fargo was kind of cool, but I think the one character that we don't talk enough about is Rico. Because Armand Assante, it's always the bad guy in these movies that acts the shit out of that movie. And Armand Assante acted the shit out of that movie. Can we both agree? Can we all agree that he probably dialed it up to a 10 while Sylvester was like at a 7?
Oh, Sylvester was like a 4. I mean, don't get me wrong, Sylvester's fine, but he's very much stone-faced Sylvester Stallone in this. He's not really overacting. He's not doing the same stuff he would have done even in Demolition Man. He is very stone-faced. for the whole thing. So yeah, Rico definitely plays it up. He's not completely hamming it up, but compared to Sylvester Stallone, he's all over the place in a great way. So he's a great enemy. You mentioned Judge Fargo, who's Max von Sydow. I thought he was a great use to kind of be like the old school judge character. He's the leader of all the judges at the start of this, the Chief Justice. He's kind of stands for everything good about what the judges are, while still kind of, knowing that maybe they've gone too far at times. He's great. And actually the family they run into in the Wasteland is
the Angel family.
Kind of like, yeah, the Angel family are wonderful.
We covered a bunch of characters there, but the Wasteland, the Angel family, it's kind of nice because they break up the movie, right? At that point, we were as you put it, we were at, not cyberpunk. What am I looking for here?
It is cyberpunk. It's very much that feel, but it's very much
Blade
Blade
Runner.
Runner. Yeah.
And then all of a sudden we get like this palate cleanser of the Wastelands, and the Angel family does it with all the mutants and
was that really a palate cleanser? Do you want to consider that as a palate cleanser? Or?
Oh, I do. When I was watching this, I actually watched this with my kids, and they love the fact that the guy, you dial his head to determine how angry he's going to be.
Oh, yes. Can I get him, Paul? Can I get him? Sorry, I had to throw that in there too.
Armand playing Rico, I was watching an interview with him, and he actually said what he was trying to do, he was trying to play Sylvester Stallone playing Judge Dredd, if that makes any sense. So his character, he was really just trying to play what Sylvester Stallone was doing, just dialing up to 11.
Well, and he's his brother, so it makes sense. They're both genetically engineered brothers. So that's actually part of the first story, The Return of Rico.
Now, Rico, the character Rico, was originally supposed to be played by Michael Ironside.
No,
I could see that. I mean, I think Armand Assante did better, but I could totally see Michael Ironside doing that.
You couldn't buy into the brothers concept. I mean, I think that would have. So I'm thinking Michael Ironside, circa Total Recall, right? He's still a great actor, or Starship Troopers. But no, Armand Assante looks like Sylvester Stallone slightly. Like he could be a slightly younger brother.
Now, Rob Schneider's character, he was actually brought in. Fergie. And we're going to talk about Fergie, and I'm going to say Fergie over and over again.
Oh my God, here it comes.
You should really connect with this character. Originally, it was supposed to be played by Joe Pesci, and Rob Schneider was actually brought on by Stallone himself and said, he is what we need to make this movie what it is.
I kind of like that they did go with Joe Pesci. I mean, because he normally plays, he'll have a tougher edge than Fergie does. Fergie comes across as like, he's a criminal. The whole story of that character is he's a criminal that you actually see him get out of prison at the start of the movie just to go right back into prison when he gets caught in the middle of one of these gang wars by Judge Dredd. Even though he was really just trying to escape, his whole skill is he can hack machines. So he hacks a robot that delivers food or something, and then he gets caught hacking this robot. But he's kind of like this kind of like loser criminal character. Like he's clearly not a good guy, but he's also not a terrible guy. He's not killing people, and so he didn't have a tough edge to him at all. Where I think Joe Pesci would have still had that kind of tough edge, which wouldn't have made any sense for this character.
Well, first off, his name is actually Herman. So if we could all just go with Herman Ferguson, we can leave the Fergie nickname out just because I'm Fergel.
Well, I understand in the actual comic books, he is not that kind of character.
I actually thought he added just the right mixture of stupid, right? He was kind of serious, kind of stupid, made the movie appealing when they weren't really sure about comic movies. The 90s was a period where they had not any good comic movies come out. So I think he was kind of, but I know he was in the comics. I think he was still The Return of Rico, if I'm not mistaken, one of the first ones. And I know that all of the comics are much more like the 2012 remake of Dredd than the other one. I mean, so the other one was probably more, comic-y, like old school Batman, like 90s Batman, whereas the new one was much more like Robert Pattinson Batman, kind of a different situation.
Yeah, and actually it's funny you bring that up too. So originally the script was supposed to be, we'll get more on the plot and stuff, was supposed to be much darker, more satirical than it was. And Sylvester Stallone joined on. He thought it was supposed to be a action comedy movie. So he forced a lot of rewrites, which is why he brought in Rob Schneider. So he went into this thing thinking action comedy, buddy comedy, though the director and the writer were thinking dark, satirical, more like the new Dredd movie that came out.
Yeah, which is a different kind of a movie.
I think for the time frame, jokey buddy comedy was the thing. Like that's what people were watching in the early mid 90s. So Sylvester Stallone thinking that is probably not wrong. And actually I was thinking that whole thing when I was watching this for this podcast was, without Rob Schneider, this is a fairly dark movie. Even with whatever rewrites, he's kind of there so that Judge Dredd's not making a bunch of offhand comments. Like we did Time Cop a while ago, and Time Cop feels like it's jokey the whole time. There's all these lines that Jean-Claude Van Damme has all these awful one-liners that come across really badly because he doesn't deliver them very well. And I think that this would be the same situation with Stallone. He's better than Van Damme, but it's still like it still would come across real weird. Judge Dredd doesn't seem like the kind of character, from what I know of Judge Dredd, that would make all these terrible one-liners. He says things like "I'm the law" and other, all these like bad law puns, but he's not.
Well, and he gives that half face when he says it too. I mean, he lowers the chin and gives the Elvis look. I'm the law.
But even like, he does other things with the court's adjourned. Like it's all those things that make sense and it works, but it's not like it's not stupid, silly, like, oh my God, what are we gonna do? That's what Rob Schneider's character has. That's the whole point of Herman. The first time I saw it, I hated that character. And on future viewings, like the viewing for the gaming podcast and for this one, I hated him less. I think it's just that I don't like Rob Schneider. So I had to get past that, and the character isn't so bad.
Rob Schneider. Oh, Rob Schneider.
We've talked about Fergie's co-star Judge Dredd a couple times. I'm going to bring up Fergie as much time as I possibly can. Did you know Judge Dredd was originally supposed to be played by Arnold Schwarzenegger or Harrison Ford?
No, come on. Arnold has difficulty saying stuff in the State Farm commercial. You can't have him doing Judge Dredd. And who was the other guy? Harrison Ford? He'd have a whip.
Yeah, I could see them trying to get Arnold to do it, and it would have probably been worse. I don't think Harrison Ford would have done it. I think you're right. I think there's no chance he was like, I'll do that. No way.
Yeah, when they brought Stallone on, he was just outside. He blew their budget, obviously, because of how much he was. And he had never even heard of Judge Dredd before taking the role.
I mean, like 2/3 of this podcast. So that makes sense.
I guess he's not alone.
That makes sense.
Well, it's good to know I'm in the same camp as Sylvester Stallone.
Well, that is good to know, because now that means you have some sort of very small, if not infinitesimal, relation.
Yeah, we're best buds. I've seen his statue in Philadelphia. We're tight. Hey, a little fun fact for you though: the Judge Dredd's gun was the same gun used in RoboCop.
That was the same. The Lawgiver was the same gun. Was the same prop gun from RoboCop.
Same prop gun.
That would make sense. I thought that when I was looking at that movie in preparation for this whole thing that we love to do, and I'm looking at that gun and I'm thinking, God, I just saw RoboCop. And now it makes sense. Was that on the extended version? Because that had to be somewhere in commentary that only you would find.
Oh, yeah, it was in the director's commentary for it. In fact, that's one of the reasons that stalled this movie so much is because RoboCop. RoboCop leans heavily on the Judge Dredd mythos and the way it looks, that they had to put many, many years between the release of that movie and this one, because originally the first version that they were going to come out with until they decided to postpone it was Harrison Ford. He was ready to go for it, but it was just too soon after RoboCop, so they shelved the project, and Harrison Ford went off to go do something else.
Which would be, I believe, wasn't that Indiana Jones and his dad?
I don't remember that. I don't remember the timing for it. Okay, so this movie is a mid-90s movie, and obviously time is never a good mistress when it comes to this kind of thing. But how did the effects look to you looking at this 30-year-old movie?
Practical. When we do our little note comparing, I'm reading your guys' notes and I'm hearing a lot of practical. It's actually something that I'm beginning to miss a little bit. I saw Godzilla X Kong this week. A great movie, awesome movie. But I'm watching this movie and I'm thinking, wow, they really put effort, like the robot. So again, I know you guys don't know the character like I do and why I always talk about him, but the ABC Warriors was a spinoff from 2000 AD and a Judge Dredd kind of canon universe. And they are awesome. And they really put the effort into making a real life robot. The Janus, the way they fought, like even the way they did the Angel Gang, stuff like that I miss stuff like that, man. That's the kind of stuff that brought you into a movie. So my 2 cents.
Yeah, I think that, like you said, the effects are practical. I think they actually look really good. They don't try to do too much with them. There aren't a lot of scenes where you're like, No one's head melts in a weird way that looks bad in 2024. It actually all looks very good. It's fairly violent, but not over the top. So there's not a ton of blood effects. What is there works, but it's not like, constant streams of blood everywhere. I don't know. I think this actually worked really well. I think Mega City 1 does look very much like a futuristic Blade Runner-y city. And I thought that the worst looking thing in the movie, in my opinion, is Mean Machine Angel, the kind of cyborg guy from the Angel Gang. But I think it still looks good. Like, wasn't disappointed with that at all. There are many, kind of one-off characters, even like we did Ghost Rider. Even Ghost Rider's head looked awful compared to Mean Machine Angel, which just kind of looks a little dated, but in a great way.
So when I was watching this movie for the umpteenth time, and I saw them, was it Rico's walking down the street? My first thought was, this looks so lived in. It looks like it could have been a real city at some point. It's watery,
Agreed.
It's rainy. And going through the commentary and some of the notes on this, the movie was filmed in the UK. And you would think that's because that's where Judge Dredd was written, but that's not why. It's because the director really wanted to use the same production people that did Blade Runner, which is why it feels so similar to that. It's the same people that created this city, created the Blade Runner city as well. I love the practical effects. I'm a big practical effects guy. Like the Hammerstein, that's the giant robot. Originally, their plan was to have a guy in a giant suit. But Cannon, the director, said, you know what? If we're going to do this, we're going to do this for real. So I think it's a giant hydraulic machine powered by 5 individuals, which is why it moves that way, because it is literally moving that way. It's not some guy in a rubber suit. It's not CGI. It is.
And that's the comic. That's the comic in a nutshell. Hammerstein is the leader of the ABC Warriors, has a huge hammer for a hand. That is the comic right there. That's what made it worth it to me.
Yeah, I love the effects on this. The other effect I thought was interesting were those giant bikes, right? Those, what were they called? Lawmaster bikes, that's what they're called.
Lawmaster, yeah, Lawmaster.
So they built those things from the ground up. Those are not repurposed Harleys or something. Those are built from the ground up for this movie. And
that was Gianni Versace, I think.
No, well, he did that as the costumes, but this thing is so powerful that they could not allow the actors to ride them. They had to be stunt people because they would get injured. So whenever you see an actual actor on the bike, that's a toned down version that doesn't move, because they built actual motorcycles that are so powerful, so strong, and the engine's so big, it would kill you.
Can we buy one? Can we buy one of these?
I honestly think the reason why it had to be so powerful because it had a giant CRT television in the middle of it, and those things are damn heavy.
Oh yeah, but you could still buy one of those things. I think wouldn't that be great?
A bike, that thing was huge. My kids, when they saw the movie, their first thought was, "Why are the bikes so fat?"
It's an office, son. It's an office. It's the judge, jury, and executioner, Rob.
I had to give them a reason. I was like, yeah, because it can fly and it's got weapons in it. That's why it's so fat.
It's got armor on it. You got to have extra room for those armor plates.
Speaking of armor plates, though, the judge's armor, I can't imagine that thing defending you. And also, why are the cod pieces so gigantic?
Gianni Versace. That's all I can say. I mean, that's actually the most praised part of the whole movie is the costumes.
When Stallone first gets off his bike for the first time and the camera's panning up from his boots and like goes up his legs, which are all tights, gets to his cod piece. Whoa! And the same thing. I realized, I was like, that thing is gigantic.
And there's your sound clip.
Exactly.
That's for Shaq.
That's for Shaq. So let's talk about the plot a little bit for this movie. I know, Jeremy, you did a nice summary of the beginning of it for it. But how'd you guys feel about the plot, or any scenes that stood out to you in particular?
I think Jeremy hit it with the wasteland scene was great. I thought the fight between Rico and Stallone was good. I liked the concept of the Janus experiments. I thought that was pretty sweet. But overall, I'm going to have to go with that wasteland thing. I just think that's it's different. It's just different enough to be weird. And you're in for a ride on that one. It's
different, but it becomes a movie that I think I would have rather enjoyed. I would have rather watched Judge Dredd spend 5 minutes at the beginning and then somehow get stuck in the wastelands and have to fight his way back for an hour. That would have been much more exciting to me. But I'm also a big Mad Max fan. This would have a very Mad Max feel to it for the wasteland area. Instead, it was, he fights, he gets captured by this gang and has to fight his way out of the gang members. I love that too. I kind of want to, I may hunt down these comics just to get more background on the wastelands. I love the, kind of dystopian future setting for things. I read lots of comics that are based in that. I like to watch movies that are based in that. So I always like to kind of get the background of why is this world so screwed up and what is going, what has happened in the wastelands that made essentially the central, the middle of the country wastelands. Like I'd love to have more background than just like, yeah, there was a war and bombs.
Go into the 2000. Get the original anthology out of 77, the 2000 AD, because they get to talk about Judge Dredd appears in the second issue, and they talk more about the shared universe in that first set of runs before they kind of dive into Dredd. But you can always get a ton of stuff there. But those old books are fun.
Everything else in the movie, not a bad thing. I do like cyberpunk, but everything else is cyberpunk. Dirty cyberpunk, but still cyberpunk. The Wastelands has that more kind of, again, Mad Maxy sort of edge to it, which I like.
I want the comics read to me by James Earl Jones. Just like that intro.
Well, he did read the beginning. I was going to say he did the intro. That's how you know they had money. They're like, how are we going to make this intro good? Who are we going to get to read it? Of course you pick James Earl Jones. Who else would read it?
What gets me, though, is normally when you have a narrator at the beginning, they're in the movie somewhere. He is not in that movie anywhere.
Well, I can still sleep on a pillow of his voice, so I'm okay.
Yeah, like I said, if he could read me the lore of Judge Dredd, I'm good. That's my audiobook right there.
No, especially if he dedicates it to you.
This goes out to Chris Roberts.
Go on, man.
There are two particular scenes that stood out to me, and they're not big scenes at all, but the opening scene of where that judge on guard is like staring off into the wasteland and that ship just floats up. It just visually, I like that scene. It kind of reminded me, the long shots on like, Tatooine or that kind of thing. I just like that kind of sci-fi stuff. But I also enjoyed the prison scene where Rico's in there and he's talking to the warden. And I really thought that was clever of how he shoots him in the throat so his voice is no longer recognizable and the guns shoot him down. I don't know why, but that one little bit right there was like, that was actually pretty smart. It was pretty smooth.
No, I think that's how you figured out who Rico was, because up until that point they didn't like introduce Rico. So up until that point you had to figure out why was he as smart or as capable as Dredd, because from the beginning he showed that he was in effect a Dredd, and it wasn't until he picked up the lawmaker or the lawgiver that you could like realize, okay, he's a judge. And so that's a great way to show how smart and ruthless he is right in the first go.
My youngest daughter, when she was saying that, that's actually what was happening. She kept asking, who is that? Who is that? Why is he in there? Like, asked a ton of questions. And that's one of those rare cases where some of these older movies where they did a great job of showing and not telling to give you that sense of who this guy really is.
Well, a scene that you also said you liked that did a lot of showing and not telling was the codpiece scene.
That's true.
That was a tremendous amount of showing.
It left a lot to the imagination, but it definitely told you what was there.
I'm telling you, blame this on Gianni Versace. Him and his daughter designed these costumes, and it was the highlight of the whole movie, because this actually ruined Stallone's career for a couple of years. And it wasn't until later that it became a cult classic. And it's really, he made a good call when he brought in Gianni Versace, because it was so edgy that it just, the cod piece became well known. I don't even know if there was a fashion show with a cod piece.
Quickly changing the topic, potential directors for this movie. So it's Cannon was the final choice for this, and that's but he turned down Die Hard with a Vengeance to do this movie. But other directors, Peter Hewitt, because of his success with Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey, they thought that was so good, they thought he should do this movie.
I mean, Death doesn't like losing chest. That's my thought there.
I was just thinking that he likes to play the guitar.
But eventually, Peter went off to go direct the well-known classic Home Alone, The Holiday Heist.
Ah, yes, that one.
Oh, no.
Straight to video on that one.
The Coen brothers were offered this movie.
The Coen brothers? The
yes.
guys who did...
The Coen brothers. The
Conan O'Brien and his brother.
Conan the Barbarian. Together.
With my intolerant accent.
I'm just trying to make sure we're on the same page, man.
And they went off to go do Fargo instead, so...
These are the Coen or the Coen? I'm still lost. Coen.
I can spell it for you. C-O-E-N.
No Country for Lost Men, guys?
Yeah.
Are you saying Pam or Pan?
I knew we were getting there.
Like I said, this movie originally was supposed to be a dark, satirical movie. Stallone comes in. He forces a ton of rewrites. So much so that the director, Cannon, no longer wanted to work with someone like Stallone ever again. Tonally, how did you guys feel about this movie?
I thought it was surprisingly dark, like you said. It still has those comic tones because, again, the early '90s, mid '90s, you have that kind of comic foil that that Herman was in this movie. So it does have that still like that '90s feel to it, but it's also like without that character, it's way darker than I remembered it being. It's the same kind of movie as Time Cop in that it's an action star in this comic movie, but Time Cop came across as exactly that. Where this does feel like actually a very good comic based property, even though I didn't know the comic at the time.
So, first off, I agree with you. I think that you needed the comic, and it is still dark for the '90s. You really want to see what they meant when they meant a dark story. The Dredd line, watch the remake, because the remake does not leave anything to the imagination. It takes a whole new view. It loses, I think, something, but it also gains a much more realistic view of the comic. But I think this hits it, right? I mean, Mega City 1, James Earl Jones kind of narrating the cursed earth and the hurting of people in one city. And it's just, hot girls fighting. I mean, come on, Diane Lane and Nilsson. I mean, they were fighting at the end and they were both in tights. What's not to love?
I'm surprised you waited an entire 30 minutes for bringing that scene up.
Wasn't going to take long.
So for me, I mentioned the dark tones of it. I thought this movie really portrayed that it was a comic. It felt like a comic without being campy like some of those later Batman movies that came around that same time period, like Batman Forever, Batman and Robin. Like I said, it felt like a comic, wasn't campy. That this is the early age of comics, comic book movies, that is, and we had not gotten to movies like Blade or the X-Men series or anything like that. So they hadn't figured out the formula quite just yet. With a 96-minute runtime, how was the pacing for this movie?
A lot crammed into a movie. I think, to Jeremy's point earlier in the conversation, 2.5 hours would have made this movie probably better. Probably like how a lot of the movies are today, especially when I'm excited about Furiosa. I think that's going to be one of the greatest Mad Max stories ever. But back then, they were never going to take a chance. So they just jammed what they thought were the highlights of a couple great books. At least I was glad that the people who had hands on the wheel created the comic.
Yeah, I kind of touched on this earlier. I think it crams a lot into that time, like Fergel said, but I wish it was a longer for that extra background. But, again, didn't get bored. There were no slow spots where I was like, what am I watching? Another movie that we're going to cover soon has a lot more slow spots than I recall. This did not have it.
Yeah, I like to say this. I felt like this movie covered a lot of ground, but kind of your guys' point, it could have done a lot more too. Looking back, I've seen this movie twice in the past week getting ready for the show today. It feels like it covers a lot of things because you got the city, you've got the wastelands, you got Aspen, you got all these areas, but I feel like there could have been more story to tell behind everything, which obviously there is because there's a whole backlog of comics around it. From what I understand, this was actually, they lifted from about 3 different main storylines for this.
It did. It did.
Now, originally the plot was supposed to be, the main villain was not supposed to be Rico, it was supposed to be Judge Death, which I guess he believes that living is a crime, but it was too expensive because he's supposed to be, I guess, a skeleton body or something. Fergel, are you familiar with this character?
I've read, I'm familiar with the name. The collection I had was not, a lot of these books, they didn't sell anymore. So what I had was what I had. So I'd found other books, but I'm familiar with the character, haven't really read the story, but that's an interesting fun fact that only you would find in the director's commentary.
Well, and I will say, he is one of the main bad guys in the Super Nintendo Judge Dredd game that has little to nothing to do with this movie. So there's another connection.
I know it's completely off script for us, but speaking of the video game, in this commentary I watched with it, like this is the first movie to be released with a video game at the same time. And in fact, they took what they called assets from the movie and used it in the game. And they took assets from the comics used in the game, which supposedly, I've never played it, you have, Jeremy, that it made it so the story did not really connect fully with the movie, but it had elements from all the different sources in there.
It does. There are scenes, the very beginning feels like the city. And then from there, there's a level that's in a desert wasteland that now it makes sense to why it's there. And then there's a scene that's kind of like in these sewer things. And that also makes sense because that's the pipes they go back into to get back into the city kind of stuff. But instead they make it a full level. Like, all those settings are there, but there are all these enemies that are not in this movie, such as Judge Death. But there's also like flying demons, all this stuff that is not in this movie at all.
Oh, sorry. I completely forgot, but you brought up the pipe with a big flame thing, which is, first time I watched it, I was thinking to myself, that's a video game level, right? They've got it. The flames go off twice every 30 seconds, and they've got to time it.
outside of the
Yeah.
when they that's kind of cool.
Little production note for you. This is from an interview with Rob Schneider about it, that they had this fire retardant gel that they put on the back of a Stallone so he wouldn't get burned by the flame. There was none left for Rob Schneider. So the two of them went in there. Stallone is covered by this stuff, so he won't get burned, but Schneider's like, I had none of it. So obviously you can tell who got paid more.
Makes perfect sense. And yet Schneider's, well, the good thing is that Schneider didn't actually have to act in this movie because, as you mentioned earlier, he plays the same character. So he just had to play that character this time with big robots and little food processing machines.
So I don't know if that's just Schneider trying to be funny or it's true or not, but this little fun fact he shared. When it comes to this movie, guys, what do you like about it? What do you love about it? What could they done better?
I am the law. That's number one. I mean, it's just Judge Dredd.
That's the good part or the bad part?
That's all of the parts. Dredd Rico, probably when you gave me the breakout, and how they used the hydraulics for the ABC Warrior, that only made me more excited for that particular effect because it really did bring it to life in a way that in my head when I read the books, I'm like, that's how I imagine it would look. So that was phenomenal. I think that, and I will go ahead and use it because I am Fergel. Fergie was a little much, but he's okay. Later on, as long as we go by Herman and not Fergie, we're okay. And I think he was all right. He could be better though.
Yeah, he's definitely the weak point in the movie. But I still think that character generally, you needed that ability to hack for part of the storyline. It works. I get why they needed him there to have some reason for this kind of criminal to help him out. It was fine, but again, I just don't like Rob Schneider too much. I think I wish I would have had a little more time in those wasteland areas or in the cursed earth areas. All that would have been more interesting. But in general, I think this is just such a fast movie. I don't know if you would want this movie to be 2.5 hours long, but if you did, you had a lot of stuff to work with from the source material, apparently, that I think needed a little more explanation. But otherwise, I mean, I didn't get bored with this, and I have to say that's a lot for some of the movies we watched. So this was a fun watch.
I'd say for myself, I was going into this movie thinking to myself, this is going to be a slog, but it is a fun movie. Rob Schneider, of course, is the thing I'm not a big fan of, just because he always plays the same character in all his movies. Overall, generally, my kids liked it, and they've never seen the movie before. Things I liked about it would be, I like the tone of it. I like the look of the city. It's like it's well lived in. Wastelands were fantastic. Just, I wish they'd gotten somebody else besides Rob Schneider. So, should people go out and find this thing?
Yes, I think you cannot go wrong. It's a good watch. I think you won't see the time go by, and I think you'll enjoy. I actually think watch this before you watch the remake because you won't get the remake will just seem different.
Yeah, I enjoyed this movie. I think it's a good introduction to the character if you want to then go back and hunt down some of the other material, which I do want to do. And I do want to see these the more recent remakes of this.
Yeah, I'd say it's a fun movie. If you're a fan of Judge Dredd, this is, from what I understand, a very light take on that character. Because, I mean, he takes his helmet off, right? He's not supposed to, he actually never does that in the comics, from what I understand.
No.
But it's not a bad movie. Like I said, my kids watch it for the first time. My kids are I got one in elementary school, one in middle school, now he's in high school. So I got two in high school now. But they all loved it for different reasons. So it's a good watch. And it says rated R on there. It is not a rated R movie. That thing should be PG-13.
Different world back then, my friend.
Well, actually, no. It's because there was an original cut that was a hard R that they edited portions out because Stallone's like, we want to be in the 13 market. They cut a ton of stuff out of it. Apply a pitch to be, have the rating lowered, but the rating agency, the MPAA or whatever it's called, didn't want to look at the new cut. So it got stuck with the R, even though it got cut out of being a hard R movie.
Wow, that means I could find that film.
Yeah, there's no director's cut. I wish there was. So would you guys rewatch this movie again, or just leave it on the shelf?
No, I've already done it. I'd do it again.
Yeah, surprisingly, yes. I would have said before watching it for this, no, but after watching it again, I've enjoyed it. So yes, I would watch this again.
There has been a remake of this movie. I'm not sure if you guys have seen it or not.
I have.
Should they continue this universe, the Stallone universe?
I think you guys will see the remake. You guys will read a comic book on Dredd and then watch the remake. And then you can kind of place it between this and the last movie. I think there's a balancing line to why this movie was still good for your kids, which is probably the biggest thing that's all you need. And then the new one is probably a lot more hyper realistic to the book, but I think they went overboard trying to go a different direction.
Yeah, I haven't seen the new one, so I can't speak to if I think you should go with one or the other. I don't think you need to do anything more with this version of Judge Dredd. Again, Sylvester Stallone now is way older. Unless there's like a full just Herman Ferguson spinoff, then maybe you do that. No, I'm just kidding. Don't do any of that. Don't do any of that at all.
Actually, no, I think they do need to do a sequel, and it's got to be Judge Fergie.
All right, guys. I am the law. We must stop this now.
with Judge Dredd, like being like old man Logan kind of Judge Dredd. Like he's now the Chief Justice. And he's sending out Judge Fergie out on assignment.
Oh, my gosh. Wow. I'm getting it a lot from all corners here, fellas. I'm going to have to put the dukes up.
If you take offense from that, that's on you. I never said Fergel. I said Fergie. So that is on you.
Fergalicious came out, and for 2 years it was horrific. Down in Fraggle Rock. So you can just turn that to Down in Fraggle Rock. When American Tale came out, I had brothers who would stand outside my windows and play Somewhere Over the Rainbow for hours and ask in oh so gentle voices, Five-o Fergal. And so it just goes on. So I'm like the bunny rabbit of names. It's a noun and a verb.
So guys, let's give our final rating on this thing using the patented Movie Smash system. No longer the Fergal one. We've co-opted it.
Ooh, I'm seeing that now.
So how would you guys rate this movie?
I'm going to go a thumb enthusiastically up the law. I'm going to give a thumb up the law. That's what I'm going to do. Enthusiastic thumb up the law.
I knew you would say that. By the way, that catchphrase, that is like Stallone just trying to make that a thing. My kids actually said, why is he still trying that?
It is. It's perfect.
I didn't have a clever thing this time. How do you beat that? So I have a half thumb. Right? It's fun. I enjoyed it. But it's not like you're going to be like, dude, Judge Dredd is the best movie I've ever seen. It's not. It's just an enjoyable time where you're like, I'd like to know more about this character. But this specific thing on its own, standalone, half a thumb.
I give it 3/4 of a Fergie thumb.
See, if we're not taking the Fergie system, why are we adding the name back?
So before we head on out, guys, I want to go over. I have a mailbag for us.
Oh man,
yeah. So this is from Johnny Blaze. Great show. After listening to several episodes with my daughter, she had a comment I wanted to share. That Fergal guy sounds like he's been smoking cigars since he was 6.
Actually 4. That was a normal thing that we like to do around the tables. All my brothers and I, we laid out the Cubans and tried to go Evas, and it's how I get the gravelly voice. I sing with scotch.
I sing with scotch. Last time I shared with you guys what our number 2 and number 3 country were of where this thing is downloaded. Let's look at in the United States, eliminating the states in which the 3 of us live. What do you think the number 1 state for downloads is?
Louisiana.
If we're talking per capita, I'm going Montana.
I'm going total download. Yeah, per capita download.
It's complete opposites. Give it to us, Chris.
Our number 1 state outside the ones we live in is Texas, and number 2 is California. So I would like to put a challenge between those two for the number 1 spot. If you're in California, you are really close to taking over Texas. Show a little California pride.
What are they supposed to do with that information? So listen harder. Like there's not much that they can do with that information.
I think there are 3 solutions for this. 1, they can go out and find a friend, tell them to download the show and watch it and listen to our entire back catalog. Just let it play in the background. I don't care if they actually listen to it or not. Or they can go back and re-download all the episodes again. That counts. Or they can go out and share it on their social medias. Tell people about us.
And now I've just told people in Louisiana to tune in. And you, Jeremy, have told people in Montana. There aren't many of them. But the ones who get good internet, you've told them to tune in.
Well, first off, there is no one in Louisiana and nobody in Montana that listens to us. So you are speaking into the wind. Nobody can hear you over there. So if you have any friends out there, please tell them about that too. Let's get our first listener in Louisiana or Montana. See, there'll be a race between those 2 states now for the first listener.
I'm looking forward to it.
So what are you guys working on now? What are you currently reading? And where can people find you?
I am reading a lot of Grant Morrison stuff right now. I'm actually going back. The DC star. So, have you guys seen the new Infinite Crisis from DC yet? It is probably the most ambitious DC comic movie that I've seen in years. It's ambitious. I mean, it's a 3-part movie. It's ambitious, and so like it is probably the best thing I've seen in a long time. Besides the new X-Men series, which is pretty dope. But still writing my comic book, still working on a bunch of different things. Got a clothing line I'm still trying to put together, trying to manage a million things at the same time.
We're preparing for the 200th episode of Retrovaniacs. It's going to be a special episode where we revisit an old game that everyone tells us we were wrong about, so that'll be a lot of fun. Other than that, the Subtastics, the band that I'm in, is getting ready to do some shows and go back into the studio this summer to put out a new album. But reading-wise, I'm still just kind of reading the same things. I'm really enjoying the Energon universe, so I've been reading through all the connected books there.
Yeah, I've got to pick those up. But yeah, Fergel, I have watched part 1 of the Infinite Crisis. I pre-ordered part 2, so I'm looking forward to that. DC really does a really good job on their animated movies. I mean,
especially this one. This would have been the ambitious project that would have gave DC a $30 billion universe.
It's crazy that they can do so well on that, but their movies have been collapsing on themselves.
Yes.
Now, for me, I'm going back, and I've built up over several months because I just haven't had time, some back issues of Batman and Detective Comics that I've got to read through. So I'm working on those things. But if you're looking to find me, you can always find me at Off Panel Creations, where we're always doing something interesting over there. As always, thank you for joining us today. If you've enjoyed the show, please give us a review on whatever platform you're listening on and share it with your friends, especially those of you in Texas, California, Louisiana, and Montana. If you want to drop us a note, you want to tell us how Fergel's wrong and how you would love to see the spinoff Judge Fergie, or make a movie suggestion, just visit us at movie-smash.com, and thank you for listening.
I am the law!
The show, please give us a review and share with your friends. If you want to drop us a note, tell us where we were wrong, or give us a movie suggestion, visit us at movie-smash.com.